pray that you restore the others to a good state of health who desire to be here so that they can. And I pray that you guide Brother Bo and help him to remember what he studied, and that he present your word to us in the way that you'd have him to. So please guide him in that. Pray that you'd answer all of the different prayer requests that were voiced in a way that would be pleasing to you. And thank you for leaving us with your words so that we can see your ways and the wonderful things that you have in store for us, and so that we can be better equipped to walk through this life by faith and not by sight, and to be able to endure the things as they come upon us. And I pray that you bless this offering, that it would be pleasing to you and useful. Thank you for giving us so many good things in this life and placing us in this prosperous country, and especially for the spiritual things that you've done for us, like purchasing eternal salvation and giving us a way that we could give you honor and glory. And I thank you for being such a loving and personal God. And I love you and pray this and thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
All right, we're going to begin our message this morning in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15. While everyone is turning there, 1 Timothy 3 and verse 15, I'll remind you of our announcements we have coming up. No announcements really this week aside from Springfield School of the Bible will be this weekend, Friday evening and Saturday morning. Next Sunday, April 3rd, will be our potluck, following evening services. And Brother Dale and Sister Sandy Schrum will be here Sunday morning to help out with our Sunday school classes. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Bible study isn't until the second Tuesday of the month, so that won't be till, what would that be, 13th. But we do have youth rally hosted by the Reedsport Church on April 9th. So keep those things in mind, and hopefully make plans to be involved with each one of those things, and be busy doing the Lord's work. All right, we're going to start in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15. And there's a phrase, this is a really well-known verse, at least it's a really well-known verse for me. I've heard it my whole life, heard it emphasized my whole life. But there's a phrase in this verse that really should get our attention this morning. And he says, the Apostle Paul is writing here to a young pastor named Timothy, pastor of the church in Ephesus, and he says, but if I tarry long, verse prior to this, Paul had just said, I'm hoping to come unto you. I'm hoping to come see you. I want to be there with you. He says, but if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. It says here that you may know how you ought to behave yourself in the house of God. Now, I'm a parent. I've been a parent for 7 years or so. I have an expectation for my children and how they should behave. If we leave church here, well, I have an expectation for how they're supposed to behave in church, right? You guys have seen me and heard me up here before, snap or say stop or whatever. Well, that's my expectation. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's too low, maybe it's too high. I don't know, but I have an expectation. God has an expectation of how we as church members should act. That's God's expectation. Now, we can act however we want to act, right? When I go back to work tomorrow, my employer has an expectation of how I should be tomorrow from 7:30 to 3:30. They have an expectation. Now, I can go and do whatever I want, but I might find that come Tuesday, I don't have a job. if I act a certain way, if I don't meet those expectations, right? I may find that not only do I not have a job, but I might get in some legal trouble. I might get in some trouble with some parents. There's a whole list of things that might happen if I don't meet these expectations. Now, if I do meet my expectations, what can I expect? A paycheck. I'm probably not going to get an award. I'm not going to get a big thank you card from the school board. I'm not going to get a bunch of parents coming in. But you know what? That's the expectation. If I'm not ready and willing to meet those expectations, then I shouldn't have said yes to my boss on the phone. I shouldn't have signed up for it. Well, it's not fair that I have to be there at 7:30 in the morning and I have to be ready to teach a class. But that's the expectation. Right? And so there's an expectation with being a New Testament church member. Acts 20 and verse 28, the Bible tells us that Jesus purchased his church with his own blood. We always focus on the cross, right? Somewhere right in here, there's the cross and the grave, and we focus on Jesus dying on the cross. God sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life, right? He was that perfect lamb, that perfect sacrifice, that because he was sinless and innocent, and yet he surrendered himself as a lamb to the slaughter. Isaiah 53 talks about before his shears is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He died on the cross. He paid that sin debt for every single person that has ever lived on this earth, that was living on the earth at that time, and that will ever live on this earth. But you know what he also did? He also purchased his church. What do you mean purchase? Well, an ecclesia, which is where the word church comes from. In verse 15 here, it says the church of the living God. That comes from the word ecclesia. The word ecclesia is referring to a group of a called out or a separated group. This group of people right here this morning is unique in this community. We're not unique because I'm 35 years old and I have a receding hairline and I have 2 children and I drive a 2008 Chevy Silverado. No, we're not unique because of me. Not unique because of any of us. We're unique because of the Lord. Not only are we saved children of God, but we're a called out assembly. Right? This chosen few. Now, we're not special because of ourselves. We're special because of the Lord. Now, he says anybody is welcome to be a part of this assembly. Through salvation and scriptural baptism, anybody is welcome. But for those that have not submitted to salvation or has not submitted to scriptural baptism or have not submitted to join this local assembly, they are not a part of this called out group. Right? So Christ separated this group of us. I didn't separate this group of us. That's why if I go start my own church, I'm separating those people. I'm secluding those people. I'm calling those people. Christ separated this group of us, not only in our salvation, but in him purchasing this right to have this secluded group with his own blood. So, if someone whoever started the Weimar Corporation, they can have an expectation. They paid the money. They paid the investment. They paid for the name. They paid for the buildings. They paid for all the rights to sell their products. And they can have a code of conduct for their employees. They can have their expectations for their employees. Whoever owns Weimar has that right. I don't have the right to go in there and say, this is my facility and you guys should act this way. But this is Christ's organization. This is Christ's institution, if you will. That's a better term. The Lord's New Testament church. And he says that we have a certain expectation. He has an expectation of how we ought to behave. And so if I don't behave the way God wants me to behave, then I'm bringing reproach on him. I'm lessening the power of the gospel message with my ungodly behavior. Because the gospel message is a message that reflects Christ and his sinlessness and his perfection and his ability, because of his love, not only his perfection, but his love to take away our sins. And when I behave inappropriately, I'm diminishing the message or my testimony of Christ. That person's not a Christian. Look at how he's acting. Look at how he treats his wife. Look at how he treats his fellow church members. Look at how he treats his neighbor. He's a Christian? That's what someone who's been saved and born again is supposed to, that's how they act? That's how I act. That's how my Uncle Jerry acts. I don't need to be saved. Not if that's how you act. So our conversation, our behavior in the house of God should meet a certain level of expectation. Look over here at 1 Peter chapter 4. We are to be different than the world. The people should see a difference in us. I think I told the story the other day about, somebody got in my car a couple weeks ago and he let a cuss word out. And he was like, as soon as the word left his lips, he was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. I have never told that individual, don't cuss around me. Don't say those words. Hey, you can't talk like that. I've never said that. But I've been around this person for the last 6-7 months. During basketball season, we were around each other every single day. And I don't know this, but all I can equate it to is he's never heard a cuss word come out of my mouth. He's never heard me say, don't talk like that. He's never heard me say, I've never got on him, but he got in my car and he said a cuss word and he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, that's not, by the way, I'm not bragging on myself. I'm not trying to lift myself up, okay? But that's kind of unique, right? I mean, there's not a lot of people anymore that don't cuss. So I'm kind of weird. I'm kind of unique. I'm kind of awkward. I kind of stick out because of that little thing. You know what? That's fine with me. I don't care. I used to care. There was a time when I was in college, 21, 22 years old, man, I was embarrassed that I stuck out, that I was weird, that I was unique. You know what? I don't care anymore. It doesn't bother me. But we're supposed to be like that. People should see a difference in us. 1 Peter chapter 4, I would love to not talk about this morning because I feel like I've talked about it a lot the last several months. But we're going to look at some things this morning that the Lord's been laying on my heart and continuing to be brought out. And, I was thinking about a little precursor to this. Paul said to the church of Thessalonica and to the churches of Galatia, he said, you know my labor of love. You know who I am. I'm paraphrasing here. But basically, he said some things to the churches of Galatia and Thessalonica where he was like, am I become your enemy because I tell you the truth? There were times where the Apostle Paul was not, he said, if I were to come unto you in person, you would not receive me. Paul knew that what he was saying was going to make some people angry and make some people mad, but he was trying to say, but I love you. I've labored night and day. I've sacrificed in my own life for you. So understand that if I'm saying things that hurt your feelings, I'm saying it out of love. Now, I'm not comparing myself to the Apostle Paul, but I'm saying that, I love this church. I love everybody here. I don't ever want to see anybody leave. That includes you, Sister Sarah? No, I don't ever want to see anybody leave. I don't ever want to offend anybody. But there are things in the Bible that have to be brought out, just like the churches of Galatia, and just like the churches in Thessalonica, that some in those congregations forgot what Paul had done for them, and all they saw was, well, he's hurting my feelings. Well, they forgot that Apostle Paul had spent nights and days in tears and laboring with them, doing Bible studies, talking with them, giving counsel, all the effort he had put in, and sometimes it's just easy to see, well, he's just me. All right, 1 Peter 4. There we go. Verse 8, it says, and above all things, have fervent charity amongst yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. Above all things that happen in a church, above all things, the way that we treat one another and we behave towards one another. Now, if we're at potluck back here, and Sister Mary's right in front of me. She's right in front of me in line. And there's one piece of cherry pie left. And she takes that piece of cherry pie. Oh, man. Sister Mary took it from me. Darn it. She knows I like cherry pie. She could have left it for me. She knows how rude of her, how mean of her, how inconsiderate. above all those feelings that I have, mean, rude, inconsiderate, all this stuff, guess what? Guess what thought I should have above all those? Above them all, I am to have fervent charity. It's a lot easier for me to be upset, angry, frustrated at her. It takes work for me to have fervent charity towards her for taking my piece of cherry pie. How dare she? Above all things, have fervent. What's fervent? Fervent is something that requires effort, takes work. Okay? Now, if you told me to go drive the lawnmower around, that doesn't take as much work as if you told me to go pull weeds by hand. I hate pulling weeds. Hate it. I'd rather just weed eat them. Right? Come back later and use a power tool and weed them again. It takes effort. It takes work. And especially if I don't want to do it. But it says here, above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves. And why? Look at this last part of the verse. For charity shall cover the multitude of sins. If I have fervent charity above all those other feelings and thoughts and emotions that I have, you know what's going to allow me to do? Sister Mary really wronged me. If Sister Mary, and I'm using Sister Mary because I know she can handle it. If Sister Mary is walking to the line and she's going, I'm really going to stick it to Brother Bo. I'm really going to get him. I'm going to take that last piece of pie. If she did that, which how do I know if she really did that? I don't. Okay? I'm assuming. I'm perceiving. But I don't know that about her. Okay? And that's our problem a lot of times. We assume and we perceive. I don't know why she did. Maybe she hasn't been paying attention the last 6 months and she doesn't know that I like cherry pie. But I've mentioned it several times. But if by some chance she did that just to stick it to me, you know what? Will allow me and her to still serve the Lord together in this church body? Charity. Because charity will cover the multitude of sins. None of us were ever able to make ourselves good enough to be sons of God, to be children of God. You know what it took? It took love. For God so loved the world. We love him because he first loved us. 1 John chapter 3 tells us. God is love. And so, what does it take for me? You know what? Maybe 5 years ago. What if 5 years ago, what if 8 years ago? What if 8 years ago, when I was a member of the church in Springfield, what if Brother Eli, I loaned him some money and he never paid me back? 8 years ago. Well, then I moved down here. No big, whatever. He's down there. I'm here. I never see him again. Then his family comes down here. What? Now we're part of the same church. Now we come to church together. Now, if we have a work day, him and I might be working together. But you know what? If I have anger and animosity and frustration towards him and all that, are we going to be, if we come into the house of God, you know what I'm going to be focused on? I'm going to be focused on my anger at him, my animosity at him. If we have a work day, I'm going to be like, well, if Brother Eli's going to be there, then I'm not coming. Great. A lot of work will get done at the church, right? Because now we've got members and we've got membership who can't get along and they can't be around each other. You know what? You know what will allow me? It doesn't absolve his sin. Because I know in our minds right now, we're thinking, well, if I forgive them or if I get along with them, then I'm absolving them of their sin. No, I can't absolve people of their sin. Okay. But you know what? I can have fervent charity. I can try for the benefit of the church to get over that so that I don't hinder the worship service here. I don't hinder the physical work that needs to be done. I don't hinder it. Well, he's wrong. Well, brother, he owes you money. You're right. He does. He does. But God didn't make me the judge. God didn't make me a jury and executioner. It's my job. Like I said, these are the words of God right here. He says, above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves. For charity shall cover the multitude of sins. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. Hospitality is welcoming and comforting. My attitude and my behavior as a member of this church, I should be welcoming to people. I should give off a level of comfort, not a level of, don't talk to me. Stay away from me. You're not allowed to, don't come in here. No, it says use hospitality. This is my responsibility. You can ask my wife. I'm not the most hospitable person. My time, I like my time. If I have a job that I'm going to do, man, I need to get that job done. I don't need any interruptions. I'll leave my phone in the house sometimes because I don't want it. That's not the most hospitable as a pastor. Okay? When the phone rings, you need to answer it. Need to be available. Be welcoming. That's what hospitality is. Be welcoming. Be comforting. I've seen churches where visitors have walked in the door. Nobody acknowledges the visitor. Nobody says, hi, how are you doing? Are you from around here? Here's where the restrooms are. Here's where you can get a cup of water. Do you need a Bible? We have some Bibles. But I've seen churches where none of that happens. God welcomes us into our house, into his house. Well, if we're God's people, if he's the head and we're the arms and the legs and the hands and the feet, we should be welcoming. How are we going to expect people to be open to the gospel message and come to salvation if we can't even be kind, be hospitable to them? We get caught up in that. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to sit in my spot. I'm going to get what I can get out of church, and that's for me, and then I'm going to leave. Above all things, have fervent charity. Above everything else. So, Brother Eli owes me money. Oh, man. I hate thieves and I hate liars. Can't stand either one of them. But you know what? Above that hate, above that frustration that I have towards Brother Eli's behavior towards me, above it all, I'm to have fervent charity. That doesn't mean I condone what he's doing. That doesn't mean I'm going to loan him more money. But it also doesn't mean that my hatred and venom towards what he did to me is going to cause me to not love him and impart love and compassion on him. And you know what? It most certainly is not going to affect him and I's fellowship and relationship as members of this church. It shouldn't. It shouldn't at all. Galatians chapter 5. Galatians 5 and verse 13. The Lord's churches are not destroyed because of sin. Okay? If we had a strip club right here, and we had a brewery right here, and we had a liquor store right across the street, those things would not destroy this church. You know what would destroy this church? It's what's destroyed churches throughout the ages. Stuff from within. You go read in 1 Corinthians and he talks about there's envyings among you. There's divisions among you. There's strife. You know what strife is? Striving against one another. I'm right. No, you're right. No, I'm right. No, I'm going to be right. No, you're going to be wrong. And then I'm going to get it my way. I'm going to get it my way, church. None of you are going to get it. That's striving. Strifes, envying, divisions, false doctrines, lying, cheating, not loving one another. James chapter 2, I don't even know if we'll get to it this morning. James chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Understand that the apostle of God, James, had to spend a whole chapter almost about how church members treat one another. He said if you treat people with respect to persons, you're worldly. Well, the way they dress, or the way they talk, or the way they carry themselves, or they like the same things I do, so I'm going to treat them a certain way. These people over here, I'm not going to treat them that way. That's respecter of persons. Now, the world cries about equality and black and white and Asian and this and that. You know what? God is a God of equality. Equality is a Christian term. It's a Christian characteristic. But we human beings, what's the word? We discriminate. I might not discriminate against black people. I might not discriminate against Asian people. I might discriminate against people that don't look like me or don't think like me or are not as, like the same things I like. I might just do that. I might discriminate against people that I think are not as smart as me. Man, the words that come out of their mouth are just dumb. I may never say any of this out loud, but that's discrimination. And I'm having respect to persons based on now if I treat someone that I think is dumb, if I treat them differently than someone that I really respect and says all the same things I do, that's respect to persons. It's a good thing God's not that way. Good thing God doesn't go, well, Bo's not as smart as me, so I'm not going to let him be saved. Good thing, because I'm not as smart as God. Galatians 5:13, for brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not your liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this. All the law, the entire law of God is fulfilled in this. If we could keep this law, we'd have no problems with any of the other laws. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. If I love my neighbor more than I love myself, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to covet my neighbor's wife, because I wouldn't want him to do that to me. I'm not going to steal from my neighbor, because I wouldn't want him to steal from me. I'm not going to lie to my neighbor, because I wouldn't want him to lie to me. I'm not going to kill my neighbor, because I don't want to be killed. It's funny how smart God is. He says, if you love your neighbor as yourself, you'll fulfill all the law. Well, this is an Old Testament verse. There's a New Testament verse over in Matthew 7, verse 12. As you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. Man, if I treat people the way I want to be treated, I'm probably not going to have many problems with people. I shouldn't say I'm not going to have many problems, but I should treat people the way I want to be treated. And if I treat people that way, you know what? I'm probably not going to steal. I'm probably not going to be a jerk to them. I'm probably not going to be rude. Because, wait a minute, I don't want them to be rude to me. It's called the golden rule. But, man, it's so funny. I work with kids all day. I work with school kids. And you're always trying to figure out a way to get through to a kid. A way to get them on their behavior. Or, I don't want to do my homework. Why should I do my homework? The teacher wants me to sit there and read this book. I don't want to do it. Well, why not? You know what? You can have a debate with a 7th grader about the principles of them reading this book, and they'll get you sometimes. They'll say, this book isn't going to help me. It doesn't affect my life right now. I've had 7th graders, 8th graders tell me that. I'm like, you kind of got me on this. I'm not really going to get into all the philosophical reasonings behind this book. But you know what it comes down to for me? A lot of times I go to respect. The way you're treating Miss So-and-so right now. The way you're treating Mr. So-and-so. Well, what do you mean? Well, you're in their classroom, and you're being very rude right now. You're being very disrespectful. Are they being that way to you? No. Okay, so you can sit there. I can't make you read that book, but you can sit there and you can be respectful because that's how they're treating you. You can be kind. A lot of times, I'm not saying that gets them all the time, but a lot of times that's what it comes down to me. Still use that golden rule with everyone. And people understand that. Even people who have never heard of Christ or God or the Bible understand, wait a minute. It's not right. It's not fair. Wherever you fall on the morality scale, most people understand there's something out of balance with me treating people this way and expecting them to treat me this way. Most people understand that. Well, it's a biblical principle. If I'm going to be rude and short and curt and treat someone so, unfairly, look at verse 15. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one another. We can treat one another poorly and treat one another rudely But I'll tell you, I've seen this church down to 3 or 4 people. I've seen this church down to just 2 people in services. I kind of like that we have a handful of people here. I don't want to see us run each other off. I don't want to see us bite and devour one another. I'd rather us have 7 or 8 people here. 10 or 12 with the kids. I'd like to see us have more people here. But I'll tell you what, you can only tap a well for so long before you run it dry. And I'll tell you what, none of us are immune to. You treat me rudely enough. Well, I can say all day long that I love the Lord and I love the Lord and I'm not going anywhere and this and that. But I'll tell you what, man, if I were to walk into church and people were being mean to me, or if I felt like the church didn't want me, or if I felt like I didn't belong in the church, or people weren't loving and kind towards me, you know what? It might wear on me a little bit. So much so that I get consumed, that it drives me away. You say, well, Brother Bo, it should never drive you away. You're right. But if the world is going to treat me a certain way because I'm a Christian, you know where I should find refuge? It's bad enough when our families don't want to listen, when our coworkers don't want to listen, when our friends and our neighbors don't want to listen. And then, you know where we should find refuge and comfort and help and support? The family of God, the household of God, people that we're part of the same body with. I mean, when a body part gets hurt, gets injured, you know what the rest of the body does? It helps carry that load. It doesn't say, well, we reject you. We kick you out. We don't support you. No, it says here, take heed that you be not consumed one of another. All right, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Now, I know that I've read a lot out of 1 Corinthians 12 the last several months. I've read a lot about, we're all part of one body, and just because the eye can't say to the feet, well, I'm not a foot, so I have no need of you. No, that's not the eye's place. The eye has its job to do. The foot has its job to do. The eye is supposed to do everything it can to help the foot. You know what? My eyes need to show me where the rocks are and where the roots are and where the puddles of mud are, so that my feet don't get hurt. They need to cooperate, not reject one another and hurt one another and be selfish and think, well, you know what? I don't do what the eyes do, so I don't need to help them out. No, he says here, you're all members of one body. And there should be no schism. Verse 25 of chapter 12 says, there should be no schism. You know what schism is? Schism is any little division. Any little thing that affects the unity and the camaraderie and the functioning of the members. If I get a sliver in this finger, and every time this finger brushes up against this finger, guess what? There's a schism. There's a disruption in the functionality of these 2 fingers. I need to get that out. Oh, it's just a little sliver. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't just let a little sliver. I got staph infection in my arm one time, in my lymph nodes, actually, because of a little sliver in my elbow. I don't necessarily remember all that. I remember it hurting a lot. But, I got slivers in my fingers yesterday. My wife and I were moving something, and I got a sliver, and I rested the thing up. She probably got tired of holding it, but I rested it. I took the sliver right out. We didn't even set down what we were carrying. A little sliver, just a little tiny thing. You know what the Bible tells us in Matthew 18? If you perceive that there's aught or animosity between you and a brother, you're to go to that brother and you're to settle it. Take care of it. Now, if I go to Brother Eli and I try to take care of it and he refuses to let it go, he says, "No, brother, I'm not paying you that money back. You know what? You snooze, you lose." Well, I tried. And it's between him and God now, but I'm still to have an attitude of love and charity towards him, because if I try to go take vengeance out on him, if I try to go reap some sort of pound of flesh from him, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hurt this church. I'm going to hurt myself and my relationship, because now I'm not trusting in God. Now I'm not following the Lord and trusting God. When God says, you reap what you sow, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Right? Do any of these verses make sense to us? Right? We may not like it, but understand that if he did something wrong, if he sinned against me, the Bible says he will reap what he sowed. The Bible says God will take care of him. But what is my responsibility? My responsibility is to try to settle it, try to take care of it, forgive him, have fervent charity towards him, and move on. 1 Corinthians 12 talks about how God has set all the members in the body. If someone is a member of the church here, you know what? I've had my opinions about church members here for 7 years. I don't know if they should be here. I don't know if they should be a church member. I really wish this person would be a member. I've thought that about several people. Man, I really wish that person would be a member here. I have all kinds of thoughts and ideas. You know what? God puts people here that he wants. And that's what I'm supposed to believe, and that's what I'm supposed to trust in. So if God put people here, who am I to treat them a certain way? I should treat them as the family of, I should treat them as God chose that individual to be a part of the same body as me. So who am I to treat them in different, you know what I'm doing? I'm challenging the decision-making and the manifold wisdom of God. Oh, it was silly of God to choose this church member here, so this person's a member here, so I'm just going to be rude to them. I'm not going to show them love. I'm not going to show them caring. So he talks about 1 Corinthians 12. He talks the whole chapter about members in particular, specific body parts and all that. And then chapter 13. Anybody know what 1 Corinthians 13 is about? Love. It's about love. It's one of the most well-known chapters in the Bible. You go to a wedding with any form of godliness or whatever, you might hear some verses out of this. Right? Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity or love, I am become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. I could be the best preacher in the world. I could give you all the best outlines and the best messages, but if I don't do it out of love for this church, Paul says I'm a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. It's worthless. It's a worthless sound. Just hear that, the orchestra's playing and all of this, and then just out of nowhere you hear the cymbal go off. Wait, that just disrupted the whole. Yeah, it's a beautiful sound, but not in conjunction with the harmony. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. Without love, driving what we do. I've shared before about coming down here and mowing the church lawn. You know how many times I've come down here and mowed the church lawn with a bad attitude? Yeah, I got it done, but you know what? It was not a blessing in my life. God was not glorified in it. It was not a positive experience for me. You know why? Because I'm moving mountains and I'm doing prophecies and understanding all mysteries, but I'm not doing it out of love. I'm doing it out of frustration. I'm doing it out of anger. I'm doing all this stuff. Oh, this person said they would do it. Or there was a man here who said he would mow the church lawn. He was a church member for a while, and he stayed a church member, but he just stopped doing it. And I was like, why? And it didn't sit well with me. It didn't sit well with me that he told me he was going to do it. He told the church he was going to do it, and he volunteered for the job, and he just stopped doing it one time. That made me angry. Made me frustrated. Well, I can be frustrated at the decision, but I shouldn't have come down here and mowed the church lawn out of frustration or out of anger. I should have done it out of love for the Lord and love for the church and love for the witness to this community. But you know what? I didn't have love in the work I was doing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profited nothing. So what I want us to understand, we're not going to read the whole rest of this chapter, but understand, he spends the whole chapter 12 talking about members and God placing members in the body and how some members are, they seem to be more important, so to speak, than other members. And then he goes into this chapter on love. That's not a coincidence. That's on purpose. Because without love, so, you say, pick your favorite body part. You know what? The right hand. Well, this is the most important body part that I have is my right hand. You know what? My right hand can do great things. He's referring to church members here. But without love, it's nothing. It's worthless. All right? Matthew chapter 18. Matthew 18, verse 21. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? How many times do I have to forgive somebody? They keep doing it. They keep doing it. They're not really sorry. They haven't repented. How many times do I have to keep doing it? How many times, Lord, do I have to forgive them? 7 times? I'll tell you what, if Brother Eli borrows money from me and doesn't pay me back, to do it 6 more times and keep forgiving him? Now, that's not necessarily what he's saying here. But if he keeps lying to me, hey, Brother Eli, what'd you drive to church today? Oh, a red truck? Really? Tonight, what'd you drive to church today? A blue truck? Why do you keep lying to me? Why are you? I can see what you're driving. Why do you keep lying to me? You know what? The Bible says here, I say not until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Now, you know what? Maybe I just stop asking him when he drove to church today. He's probably going to lie to me. That doesn't mean I don't forgive him. Well, how do I forgive? How in the world do I forgive? How do you forgive? Ephesians 4:32, be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. I'll tell you what. I've learned how to do a lot of things in my life. I've learned how to do things I never thought I would do, and I've made mistakes. I don't know that I'm very good at forgiving, but you know what? The Bible tells me I'm supposed to forgive. You know how? The only way that I know how to forgive is to love someone through love. That's the only way you can forgive. How was God able to forgive me? It wasn't because I earned his forgiveness. It wasn't because I showed him that I was worthy of his forgiveness. Guess what? He died. He died before I was ever born. If at 11 years old, sitting in the back pew of that church building, when I accepted his forgiveness, I could have said, you know what? Forget you, God. I'm never trusting you. And I could have went the rest of my life and never been saved. And guess what? He still would have forgiven me. You don't wait to forgive somebody when they've shown you that they've changed. You forgive them. Just like God forgave us. Well, wait a minute. Wait. They don't deserve my forgiveness. Did we deserve God's forgiveness? Even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. Until 7 times, God? Jesus said 70 times 7. Now, don't keep track and don't go, okay, 490 times. 490 times I'm going to forgive. And now 491, I'm not going to forgive Brother Eli for lying to me. No, he's saying here, there's no limit to God's forgiveness. There's no limit to my forgiveness. I've said before, if someone hurts you, if someone wrongs you, you know what? If I stick my hand out to pet the dog and the dog bites me, I can forgive that dog, but I'm not going to reach my hand out and try to pet him anymore. But that doesn't mean that I should, I'm using a dog as an example. I'm using an individual. Should I hate them? Should I hope for their demise? Should I hold a grudge against them, and should I let it affect how I treat them, especially as members of the Lord's church, the Lord's body here locally in this church? No. You know, and sometimes we get offended. I already mentioned this, but I am convinced we get offended by perceived slights or assumptions. And that's not really the case. But I perceive it that way, or I assume that it's that way, and now I'm going to hold a grudge. Well, here's the thing. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Extend some forgiveness. Extend some fervent charity. You might find out, just might find out, that what you perceived or what I assumed wasn't the case. Now, we're not going to read through this whole passage here, but this servant came to his Lord, and he owed the Lord a great debt, 10,000 talents. And his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife to be sold, and his children to be sold. And the servant fell on his face, and he said, Lord, please forgive me. 10,000 talents. The Lord said, okay, I'll forgive you. That servant turned around and went and cast his fellow servant into jail because he owed him 100 pence. Now let's just use what we understand. Let's use $10,000 and 100 pennies. God has forgiven me of a debt I could never repay. And I'm going to go and just drive Brother Eli into the ground because of a tiny little debt, tiny little wrong. 100 pennies. When the Lord found out about it, he said, nope, you're going to jail. You didn't learn anything from me. I just extended you a lifetime of forgiveness, and you're going to go imprison your fellow servant for 100 pennies? This is the exact lesson we're to learn. God has forgiven us an eternity of sin that we could never repay, and we turn right around and we go chasing our fellow man for these little things. That's what Jesus is telling Peter here, 70 times 7. God has forgiven you, Peter. You extend an attitude of forgiveness and love and compassion to your fellow brethren. Okay? It doesn't condone sin. I know we're all, if you're like me, man, I used to get in trouble when I was a kid because people broke the rules while we were playing football, and I would get in trouble because I was so upset. You broke the rules! I am a rules guy. Before we would go play basketball at the park, okay, guys, we need to figure out where the out of bounds is. Bo, can we just play? No. We need to figure out, is it that line? Is it the next line? If you touch the wall, are you out of bounds? I got to know the rules because we got to follow the rules. Right? That's me. If someone follows the rules, they should get punished. You don't act like this. You don't treat people like this. It's not fair. You don't treat me like this. Don't treat my... You need to get punished. Something bad needs to happen to you. You know what? Again, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Exodus 32, what's the verse? I will fight for you. Exodus 14:14. I will fight for you. Okay. We're to show love. This is the behavior of the bride, behavior of the Lord's church. We're to show love. You know, sometimes showing love, I've said this before, sometimes showing love to my children is correcting them, standing up to them, standing up to their the foolishness that's bound within their heart. But I stand up to it, I confront it. But you know what? I try to do this with my kids all the time. They get in trouble, they understand, they know why they get in trouble. Let some time go by, come back, I give them a hug. I don't have to condone the wrong thing they just did, but they can still know that I love them. Well, we can do that with our brothers and sisters. I don't have to condone what they've done, but with God's help, I can love them. Right? Romans chapter 14. We'll finish with this. Romans chapter 14 and verse 10. He says here, but why dost thou judge thy brother? Or why dost thou set at naught thy brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Verse 11, for it is written, as I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then every one of us shall give account of himself to God. I'm going to give an account to God of how I have behaved as a pastor, how I have behaved as a church member. I'm going to give an account. I'm going to give an account as how I've treated Brother Eli. I've used Brother Eli through this whole message, right? By this time, brother, you owe me at least $800 with interest. I'm going to give an account of how I treated him. I'm not going to get to stand before God and say, yeah, but God, he cheated me out of the money. He lied to me. No. I'm not standing before God talking about what Brother Eli did. I'm standing before God talking about what I did, how I responded, how I treated him. And by the way, understand that we're going to be standing before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We're going to be standing before Jesus, the one who endured more unfairness. He stood before Pilate And Pilate said multiple times, I find no fault in this man. Why do you want me to crucify him? He stood before the high priest. They had to pay off people to come in and lie about Jesus. So I don't think us playing it wasn't fair, God, it wasn't right, that's not going to go over well with Jesus, because he's the king of dealing with unfairness. I'm going to stand before God, and I'm going to give an answer as to how I treated God's people, how I behaved in the house of God. There have been times I've come into church and I've been short and snippy and I've snapped at people and I've been rude. It's not how I should be. So what if I'm frustrated? So what if I had a rough day? So what how people have treated me in the world? I don't get to push the way the world has treated me onto you guys and say, well, I just can't loan you my lawnmower anymore because my neighbor, when he loaned used my lawnmower, he just tore it up. No, we're going to give an account of ourselves to God. We're going to stand before God, and I'm going to give an account of me. I'm not going to give an account or an explanation or a justification or a history of anyone else's behavior or their attitude. It's going to be me and mine before the Lord. And so we need to be able to stand before the Lord with a clear conscience and be confident. If I have fervent charity, above all, I have fervent charity, well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to have as many things to answer for before God as some others. Because above all, I have charity. Let's go ahead and stand. As we have a moment of invitation here at the altar, the altar is a place of prayer. It's a place of respect and reverence before the throne of God. You look in the Old Testament, Abraham built an altar, Noah built an altar, Jacob built an altar. There's multiple altars in the tabernacle. This altar here, it's a place of, like I say, of respect and reverence before the Lord. And this altar is open for anyone. Don't be embarrassed to come before God's people. Don't be embarrassed of who's watching. This is a place between you and God, and it's open at all times. Like to do an altar call at the end of a message, because sometimes that's when our hearts are softest. But understand this altar is open, and it's a place to come and talk to the Lord. Let's look to the Lord and bow our heads and close our eyes, and we'll look to the Lord in a word of dismissal prayer. Pray for those that are here at the altar. Pray for the prayer requests that we heard this morning, and pray for Sister Chrissy. And remember our church here, and remember all the Lord's churches today as they meet today. As we pray and we're dismissed, Sister Julianne, would you please pray for us?
Dear Father, thank you for the opportunity that we've had to be in your house, Lord, and to look into your word, Father, and pray that you be with each one of us, Lord, and first and foremost, our walk